So, what happens when a warning from all the way across the Atlantic lands right in the heart of Texas? Today, we're breaking down a viral video from British activist Tommy Robinson. He's claiming that a pattern of cultural change he says he's witnessed in the UK isn't just on its way to America, it's already here. Let's dig in and see exactly how he builds his case.
Right off the bat, this quote tells you everything you need to know about the video's tone. This isn't framed as some abstract political theory. It's positioned as an urgent alarm bell, something born from, in his words, pain. He's not just presenting an idea, he's claiming to have lived through the consequences and is trying to warn people who haven't yet.
So, here's how we're going to break this down. We'll start with the core warning to America. Then, we'll zoom in on what the video calls the Texas blueprint. After that, we'll look at the numbers it uses as evidence, explore its call to action, and finally, unpack the kind of surprising, optimistic note it ends on. Okay, so what's the big idea here? The video basically presents Robinson's visit as a mission. He's in the US to warn Americans about a really deep cultural shift he says he's watched happen in the UK. And his argument is that this shift isn't something on the distant horizon. He believes it's already made landfall right here in the States. And the video's main claim is that America is following in Europe's footsteps toward what the speaker calls Islamification. Now that's the term he uses to describe a process of demographic and cultural change he links to Islamic immigration. But he doesn't point to the whole country. Instead, he zooms right in on one state, Texas, arguing it's the epicenter where this pattern is unfolding most clearly right now. All right, so to make this warning feel less abstract and a lot more immediate, the video narrows its focus to a single case study, the city of Plano, a suburb of Dallas. This is where the theory is supposed to meet reality on the ground.
And the argument here is that what's happening in Plano isn't just a random shift in population. No, it's presented as a deliberate blueprint for cultural transformation. It's a pattern that the speaker claims he recognizes from his own experiences back home in the UK. So here's how the video tries to build that case. It starts with a big visual anchor, a huge mega-mosque. Then it kind of pans out, showing you all the surrounding halal markets and Islamic shops to paint a picture of a self-sustaining community. The final piece of evidence it presents is the planned housing developments, like one called Epic City, which are framed as a strategy to create these distinct, almost separate enclaves. Now, to move the argument from just buildings and businesses to actual people, the video introduces a personal story. This anecdote about a local American woman who supposedly fled the area because of harassment is used to connect the changing landscape to what it portrays as direct negative consequences for the people who were already there. And that story leads directly into a key concept the video really leans on: white flight. The way the source presents it, it's like a feedback loop. Original residents feel alienated by the demographic changes, so they move out, which then, of course, just speeds up the very shift that made them feel uncomfortable in the first place. Okay, so the video has laid out its case in one Texas suburb. But how does it argue that this isn't just some local one-off story? Well, it pivots. It moves from anecdotes to data, trying to scale the argument up from Plano to a national and even an international level. To make its point, the video uses the speaker's own hometown of Luton in the UK as a kind of cautionary tale. It shows this demographic forecast, predicting this massive 70+% growth in the Pakistani and Bangladeshi communities by 2030. While other groups are projected to stay almost flat. The big takeaway here is meant to be the incredible speed of the projected change. Next, the argument tries to connect that demographic change directly to social problems. It highlights this statistic: a reported 10-fold increase in rapes in the UK over 2 decades. The video then draws a direct line from this to immigration, contrasting the UK with countries like Poland and Hungary that have much stricter policies. And finally, the argument turns to national security. The video claims there are 40,000 people on a terror watch list in the UK. The clear implication being made here is that as certain populations grow, the government's ability to keep track of potential threats is just going to be completely overwhelmed. So, after painting this picture of a problem, backed by what it presents as observations and data, the video makes a really dramatic shift. It moves from diagnosis to prescription. It stops being just a warning and becomes a direct call to action. And that whole pivot kicks off with this simple but really provocative question. It's a challenge aimed right at the viewer, you know? It's designed to pull you out of just passively watching and force you to think about where you stand. And the video doesn't just leave that question hanging out there. It actually provides a clear, grassroots-focused toolkit for what to do. Research what other communities have done, organize locally, talk to your political representatives, and ultimately use your vote to elect politicians who are, in the video's own words, aware of the problems.
Now, after a whole video filled with pretty dire warnings, the conclusion takes a really surprising turn. The whole tone shifts from alarm to optimism, and that hope, it's centered squarely on the United States.
So, what's the source of this sudden hope? It all comes down to a sharp contrast the video draws between American and European politics. The argument is that while European leaders are too scared to even talk about these issues, America has, quote, brave politicians who are willing to have these tough conversations.
And this, quote, wow, it really captures the video's massive conclusion. It basically frames the domestic American election as this world-changing event. In the speaker's view, the election of Donald Trump wasn't just another political win. It was a light at the end of the tunnel for all of Western civilization.
So there you have it. From a stark warning to a proposed blueprint for resistance, the source video lays out a pretty comprehensive and for sure controversial argument. It presents this clear model of what it calls cultural defense, which leaves us with one big question to think about. What does a model like that actually look like in practice?